Good evening. My name is Reverend Jason Carson Wilson, and I'm the founding executive director of the Baird Western Liberation Initiative. We're here tonight with Sharmaine Brown to have a really important conversation about gun violence and its effect on families and our society. And so I'm just really glad to have this opportunity to talk to you tonight, Sharmaine, and to have you share your story and share your story about your son, Jared.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So please tell us about Jared and how uh, gun violence affected your life.
Was my middle son, and in 2015, 2 weeks before his 24th birthday, he was shot and struck in the forehead by a stray bullet, and he died instantly.
I mean, I guess it's a dumb question that I've always had to ask when I was a reporter, but how did that make you feel? I mean, how did that, what feelings ran through your mind as you learned that?
Well, I was actually devastated. One, the way we learned about it is returning from a trip from visiting our home state in South Carolina. We were visiting over the weekend, and we returned that following Monday. We didn't find out until that Tuesday, and my husband was actually backing out of the driveway, headed to this Home Depot. And as he was, driving out, he noticed a note that was left on our front door. And so he, pulled back in the driveway. He got the note, and on his way en route, he decided to call. There was a number listed, and it stated to please give a call. So he did. That's how he found out that our son was there. He called. They asked him for a case number. He gave it to them. Then, in turn, asked if he knew Jared, and he said, yes, it was his son. And they told him that they had him there. And he was like, well, where is this? Where? And they told him that it was an incident that took place over the weekend, and Jared was killed, and he was there. And so he immediately called me, and while I was at work, and that's when I found out. So I came home, rushed home, and just utter disbelief, couldn't believe it. And he handed me the note, and I in turn called as well. And that's what was stated again, the same thing that was told to him, that we needed to contact the Atlanta Police Homicide Department. And that was the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office, is where we got the news, because that's where he was at. When he was shot, he died instantly. And so they immediately took him there.
So describe how that devastation has affected your family.
It literally had just, shattered our whole world. It changed us in a complete direction. For me, I turned to advocacy to start advocating on behalf of other families, who life had been impacted by gun violence. It propelled me to start, you know, doing the advocacy work that I do now for gun violence prevention. I knew that I did not want another family to have to experience what we live with each day. And that's what I have been doing now for since it happened, like a year after it happened. I learned about Moms Demand Action. I started advocating with Moms Demand Action. And then I learned through Moms Demand Action about Everytown, the Survivor Network. I joined them and been ever since now for the last 4 years, I've been advocating with Moms Demand Action and Everytown for gun safety. I started Jared's Heart of Success, which is a vision God had given me after I prayed and asked for direction on how I should move um, in Jared's remembrance. And so I started Jared's Heart of Success. It's a youth nonprofit foundation. Um, it's a mentoring and leadership youth nonprofit foundation. And so I work with youth and young adults, boys and girls.
So, what do you know about the person who killed your son?
Um, well, what I learned during the trial, because I didn't know him, but I met him at the trial, and I learned that he was a person who had been a troubled youth who actually was engaged in gang activity and just had a really bad past starting early on um, from from a youth standpoint. Um, so
So have you? You said you met him. So have you? What kind of relationship do you have with him?
none. I do not have a relationship with him at all. Actually met him at the trial,
Mhm.
and he was sentenced to life plus an additional 30 years. And I have not have contact with him since the trial. I spoke to him directly at the trial, but I have not had any contact with him.
And so
He
what
didn't,
does?
he wasn't remorseful during the
Hmm.
trial at all. So
So seeing him, I guess in seeing him in that manner, and I mean the person who killed your son and not being remorseful, what does it? How does that give you fuel to use Jared's heart of success to make sure you prevent maybe other youth from turning into the person who killed your son?
it actually does give me the fuel each and every day. I want to make a difference in the life of any youth or young adult that I come in contact with. I want to empower them to use their life in a purposeful manner and not to waste time. I feel like our youth need help and in so many areas. One, I think self-esteem. I think for him, his self-esteem was low. So definitely that's one area that I focus on, self-esteem, and I also in their confidence. And so yes, it has directly impacted me to really, dig in and work with our youth and our young adults.
And so, of the youth you work with, is there a particular demographic that you may not necessarily focus on that, but that you end up working with, or is it youth across the board?
It's youth across the board, starting at the age of 8. So I work with youth in middle, elementary, and high school. I feel like the earlier that you make the connection and a contact with youth, and get them empowered and going in the right direction, that's when you can see the most results. You oftentimes people wait until high school. I think high school is too late. I think early on, the earlier the better. Now our youth is, been challenged with so many different things with, social isolation and peer pressure and being bullied. And so those are a lot of the areas that I work with our youth and our young adults. And I also go into schools, into high schools. So my organization it's a community organization, but I also partner with several high schools in the community and after school programs within the community to work with youth and young adults. I also serve on the national advisory board for Sandy Hook and partner with them as well and bring some of their initiatives into the school here in Atlanta.
And I guess, I mean, looking at the way of doing all this work to prevent kids from going the wrong direction. I mean, I think the other thing can look at too is on the other end of the spectrum is making sure that um, you don't have access to guns. And I guess one of the things that we keep hearing from individuals who might prize the Second Amendment a little too much is that guns don't kill people, people kill people. It's not the gun. And I guess with that in mind, what would you say to somebody that struggles with um, what we might consider, or what we do consider sensible gun laws?
Well, I think that um, actually guns do kill people, so when they say someone has to use it in that manner, but anytime when you pick up a weapon, you have to know that if you're picking up a weapon and you're firing it at someone, it's a possibility that that person can die. So I don't believe that guns don't kill people. Guns do kill people. We see that. We see the effect of gun violence every day. And definitely, especially when guns get in the hands of the wrong individuals.
And so, what do you think we need to do to prevent that?
We need stricter gun laws. We need it's here in Georgia. There are so many things that we are currently working on now. We're working on the repeal stand your ground law. We're working on that. The red flag laws need to be reinforced, and just also safe storage. If people, safely, we're not trying to take away guns. So usually when you hear that, it's everybody in an uproar. Oh, they're just trying to take away guns. We're not trying to take away guns. We're trying to, make sure that you are a responsible gun owner. It's nothing wrong with you if that's what you choose to do, but you need to be responsible with it and you need to have it legally. The person that took my son's life, he got the gun off the street. So there's a lot of guns on the street, and you have to have you have to properly store your weapons.
And even in situations where you might have people who have their guns legally, I mean, what are your thoughts on like some of the issues with mental stability and those connections?
Well, I'll go back to my situation. The individual got the gun illegal off the street, but oftentimes, how are people getting these guns on the streets? They're getting them through breaking in people's cars. That's one way. Again, people are not properly, um, having the gun stored properly. If you have a gun in a vehicle, there's also, safety locks that you can have on it. Again, it's just properly storing your gun if you have it illegal. Background checks, making sure enforcing background checks. We got to, keep to that. Got to have background checks, making sure individuals get that. That also will help keep it out of the wrong hands.
Mhm. And people who have survived gun violence call themselves different things. How do you identify?
I'm definitely a gun violence survivor, but I am an advocate for gun violence prevention.
And I mean, every day we new survivors, we have new gun violence survivors, and I guess as they come to us, what message would you have for those new survivors and for survivors who are not ready to really come out and talk about what they've survived? What advice would you have?
I've met individuals who have been directly impacted by gun violence. And, you know, for me, I just try to be there, be a support system for them. And we have these conversations. There are people who are not ready. Everyone can't just come out and do advocacy work right away. It took me about a year before I started doing advocacy work. I think you need to first take care of yourself. Self-care is very important. You need to make sure that you go through the process of grief. Grief have 5 stages, so you need to be ready. And if you're not ready, don't do it. For me, grief is a continual process that I go through. So you have to definitely take care of yourself. You have to do self care. And if you're not ready, don't do it. You do it when you're ready. So I just try to be a support system for survivors and help stand in the gap for those who are not ready.
So what kind of self-care would you recommend?
I would recommend if you need counseling, get counseling. That has helped. I got counseling. Um, and have a support system. You need to have a support system to help you in the process. Oftentimes you find survivors just they're trying to, deal with it or process it by themselves. I think you really need to have a strong support system. And for self-care, if you need to, the Everytown Survivor Network have resources for individuals, for survivors who may need counseling. So they have a multitude of resources, a good support system. So I definitely would tell anyone, if you're a survivor and you have been impacted by gun violence, reach out to this Everytown Survivor Network.org and get in contact and, take use of some of the resources that they have available for survivors. But for self-care, for me, I meditate, I practice mindfulness, I exercise, and just sometimes just don't do anything. There are days I just need a mental day. So I take that, take time, be quiet and be still.
So are there days too when you find yourself needing to do that advocacy and overdoing it? And when that happens, what do you do?
Well, this past weekend, this last week was National Gun Violence Survivors Week. And for 7 days it was a week where you help amplify your voice as well as others and their stories. And so it went on all week, and then in the midst of that, I actually lost a very, very good friend who was like a sister to me. She died unexpectedly. And so I had to take a moment and just step away from everything, and literally just I took a day and almost 2 days and just rest, just really just was mindful of everything that was present and literally rest. And I have like I said, a really good survivor network group of sisters that they call, check on me. We have a group that we keep in very close contact with and just support each other. So
So I'm so sorry for your loss.
thank you.
You're welcome. And in the midst of COVID, how has this moment uh, affected how you continue to process your loss?
Well, I have also, with our youth foundation, we pivoted. We were some activities we do online, virtual now, and then there are still some activities we do in person. For my advocacy work, the same thing. There's a majority of our work have been virtual. So I've still been able to do my advocacy work just on a different platform, mostly virtual instead of in person.
And so, in your advocacy work and working with the foundation, how does it make you feel to maybe to sometimes see your son in the faces of the kids that you work with?
It literally brings me joy just to see that. I often say his heart continues to beat through the lives of others and through the work that we do in the lives of others. And so we have had two young men that was in our program graduate from high school. One went into the Army, another went into the Navy. I was just literally in tears to just see how their life had changed for the better. And when I speak with their parents to see how they are still doing today, also I have two young ladies, two teens that's phenomenal. One serves on the National Advisory Board for Sandy Hook. Another serves on the National Advisory Board for Students Demand Action. And so to just see them and their advocacy work and to see how, when I first met them, how they were really shy and not too confident, but now if you was to see them, oh my goodness, you would never know. any of that. I mean, they are just doing exceptionally well. And then I have others who are just doing really, really well in school, as well as we do a lot of um, work in the community. And so, I mean, they really, really active participants in the community and their community outreach. So it just literally brings me joy when I work with our youth and young adults and just see how it has impacted their lives and just hear the stories from their parents.
Sounds like this is really doing a great job of developing tomorrow's leaders. And I mean, as I mentioned, tomorrow's leaders, it kind of brings me to think about some of our present leaders, and it wasn't too long ago that at least some of our present leaders here in DC dealt with an armed siege on the Capitol. And I guess
Yes.
um, what are your hopes that um, that event that forced them to act out drills that high school students have to act out now for safety's sake in real time because their lives were in danger? How much do you hope that the, that maybe the good that comes out of that, not that that was good, but that the positive that might come out of that is that it could inspire support of good gun violence legislation?
Well, my hope is I'm very optimistic, but my hope and prayer is that they would take this time and make the right decision and pass the laws that need to be passed for safe gun legislation to be in place. Literally for them, as I watched the TV that day, it made me think back about the students that lost their lives at school, at all the various schools, even with, my goodness, the children at Sandy Hook, and how they literally had to hide in bathrooms and hide underneath the desks. When I watched them that day, they were literally hiding behind, you know, the pews in the room and where they were. So
Mhm.
my hope is that with them literally being faced, you know, with this violence that was upon them, that surely now that they would make a difference and say, this needs to stop no more, and pass these laws that have literally been sitting on their desks for what, almost 2 years, if not longer now. So much longer.
I mean, there was a lot of things going on that in that moment, a lot of it was, let's just be perfectly frank, some white supremacy going on and
Hmm.
white nationalism and racism, but obviously um, there were firearms involved outside of obviously um, the police. And I guess for you, how triggering was that for you to see that on TV?
It just, it was triggering, but it's been going on too long. It's been going on too long. It hasn't stopped. And so when I see it, it's like enough is enough. You have to stand up and do the right thing. So I'm very optimistic and prayerful that at this time now that the changes, they literally can make the changes that needs to be. They are literally there. And so they can pass these laws. There's no reason why. And so I just hope that now they would literally stand up and do the right thing and make sure these laws get passed for safe, for not just for us, but for themselves and their families and their loved ones.
And as you do this work, how do you confront some of the stereotypes that are talked about that are sort of in the context of gun violence when we talk about confronting gun violence? there's always this stereotype that a certain community is the only community participating in gun violence. I mean, long story short,
Mhm.
stereotype around the Black community that as though that community is the only community that participates in gun violence. And as you do this work, how do you confront that stereotype?
Well, yes, the Black and Brown communities have been um, disproportionately impacted, but it's not just our communities. Gun violence is in every community now. It's not just certain communities. It's everywhere. You saw it. It's actually in our nation's capital. So it's not just in our communities. Yes, we are impacted, but it's everywhere now. So I don't even look at it like that.
Um,
It's not a one person issue. It's
mhm.
a national issue. It's a pandemic. Gun violence is a pandemic.
So as I mean, we really talked about what happened to your son and how he was the inspiration to the work that you do, but um, tell us a little bit about him so that because I think we all should know who he was, the type of person he was.
He was very kind. Just, I'm telling you, he would literally, I often tell people, give you the shirt off his back. He was just a kind, he had a fun, loving spirit. He was the jokester in the family. He was always, making jokes, the person that made people, all of us laugh all the time. He would pull tricks on his sisters and friends. And, he was just a joy to be around. Had a very good heart and he was a loving person, and we miss him so much.
What kinds of things did he like to do?
He loved to play basketball, and I mean, at that time he loved to play video games. And so those were the two things, his two favorite things, video games and basketball.
And so does I know that you have an older daughter and a younger daughter. Do they participate in some of your advocacy or?
They have actually, when I started, my oldest daughter tried. She actually has a degree in psychology and she was working with me early on, but she told me, Mom, it's too much. She said, I just can't. So I understand that and I respect that. Our younger daughter, she helps me behind the scenes a lot. A few times she's participated out publicly in events, but for the most part, it's really, really hard for them. And for my husband, even he's a behind the scenes person. He does a lot of the work behind the scenes and help me with different activities and prepare for activities, but they're not public about the advocacy work. And I respect that because I know that they're not ready. So I don't force that upon them. I just stand in the gap.
And obviously I mean, mourning is forever, but how is your husband processing? Because I mean, yes, it's a loss of life and loss of his child, but also the only son because of
It's
that.
really hard for him. It's really hard for him because it was our only son. And that's what you dream. His dream was he wanted to have a son and teach him everything he knew. And his life was cut short. So it's very, very hard for him. So now with him, he mentors young men on his job. And so that's the way he chose to do his work. And so I'm just so respectful of that and just let each one of them process it, in the way that works best for them.
And so when was you said your son was killed near his 24th birthday. When was his birthday?
It was July the 11th in 2015. So July 29th that year, he would have been 24. So it's been almost 6 years. This year would be 6 years.
So how do you all celebrate his life?
Each year on his birthday, I give a scholarship to a graduating senior. Well, since for the last 2 years, we have given a scholarship to a graduating senior whose life has the second year whose life has been impacted by gun violence. So now I have dedicated especially to each year to be certain to give back a scholarship to a graduating senior to the college they choose, in his honor. So each year we celebrate his birthday. Around that time, it's the same time we give the scholarship, and then we always have a celebration.
So does that, so have you created kind of a family of those students? Do you keep in touch with them as they
Yes, yes,
matriculate?
I do keep in touch with them, check on them, and see how they're progressing. And they, the last two students that we gave scholarships to, are doing exceptionally well.
Now, were these were the students that
They're
were
not,
at the,
the two that received the scholarship weren't in the program.
okay. Okay. So if you could leave people with one important message, what would it be?
To remember that gun violence affects everyone. If it does not or have not impacted you directly, be thankful. Be thankful to God. But know that there is so much work that needs to be done. So, in some form, just look out. Look out for your neighbors, look out for your friends, look out for your family members, and just keep us all lifted. Keep us all lifted in prayer. And help also, if you can, make a difference. Join us in the movement. They can text 6 to 64433, the word survivor, and join the movement to help put an end to gun violence.
Okay. So is there anything else that you'd like to add or anything you think I've forgot to ask?
No, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.